Sourdough bread. Most bread rises because of commercial yeast added to the dough. Sourdough does not work that way. It ferments using a live culture called a starter, a mixture of flour and water that captures wild yeast and bacteria from the environment. That starter is fed regularly, sometimes for years, and bakers use it to leaven the dough slowly over many hours. The result is a thick, crusted, open-crumbed loaf with a mild tang that commercial bread simply cannot replicate. That tang comes from lactic and acetic acids produced during fermentation, which also affect the texture, the shelf life, and the way the crumb holds up when you slice it. A properly made sourdough has an irregular interior full of air holes, a chewy but not gummy crumb, and a crust that crackles when you press it. A weak version goes dense, gummy, and flat, with very little of the complexity that makes the effort worthwhile. The starter is the most argued variable in sourdough culture. Every baker defends their own as superior, and no two starters behave identically because the local microbial environment shapes each one differently. Whether a loaf from a bakery using a 40-year-old starter truly tastes different from one made with a starter built last month is the kind of question that fills comment sections for good reason. Pasta. Pasta is not one thing. That is the fact most people carry incorrectly. It is a family of wheat-based shapes, each with its own logic, and the logic matters more than most people realize. At its core, pasta is made from durum wheat semolina and water, sometimes enriched with eggs, then shaped and either dried or cooked fresh. Durum wheat is harder and higher in protein than standard wheat, which gives pasta its firm, slightly toothy texture when cooked correctly. The shape is not decoration. Ridged tubes like rigatoni catch thick sauces inside their walls. Long flat ribbons like pappardelle are built to hold braised meat. Thin strands like spaghetti work best with oil-based or light tomato sauces that cling without weighing the noodle down. In Italy, pairing a pasta shape with the wrong sauce is a real point of disagreement, and many Italian cooks will tell you they can spot a bad pairing from across the room. Dried pasta and fresh pasta also belong in different conversations. Fresh pasta made with egg yolks is tender, silky, and quick to cook. Dried pasta is firmer, more forgiving, and in many uses genuinely more satisfying. Which one is better depends entirely on what you are making, and that is a question with no clean answer. Udon. The first thing that strikes you about udon is the thickness. These Japanese wheat noodles are among the thickest in the world, with a pale, almost white appearance and a cross-section closer to a finger than a thread. They are made from wheat flour, salt, and water, with the ratio of salt carefully adjusted based on the season and humidity. The dough is traditionally kneaded by foot, a process that builds the elasticity responsible for udon's signature chew. When made well, udon has an almost bounce-like resistance between the teeth, smooth on the outside and satisfying all the way through. That chew is the entire point, and people who do not expect it often find it overwhelming on first contact. And udon is served hot in dashi broth, cold with a dipping sauce, or stir-fried in a wok with vegetables and soy. The broth varies significantly by region. Kanto-style broth in eastern Japan is darker and saltier, built on soy. Kansai-style in western Japan is lighter, cleaner, and more delicate. Both sides of Japan are firmly convinced their version is the correct one, and the conversation between them has been running for centuries. The question of whether udon deserves more international recognition than ramen is one that udon fans answer quickly and loudly. Pita bread. Pita looks like a flatbread. It bakes like a balloon. That transformation is one of the more unusual things wheat flour can do, and it happens because of a very specific relationship between heat and steam. Pita is made from wheat flour, water, yeast, and salt. Ajao rolled into thin rounds and baked in an extremely hot oven. The intense heat causes the moisture inside to vaporize almost instantly, inflating the dough into a puffed disc. When it cools, it collapses, leaving behind a pocket running through the middle. That pocket is not added or cut. It forms entirely on its own, and it is the defining structural feature of pita. The bread has been a staple across the Middle East and Mediterranean for thousands of years, used as both food and utensil. It scoops hummus, wraps falafel, holds grilled meats, and soaks up sauces. The pocket style is the most recognized version globally, but many traditional versions are made thicker, without a full pocket, and eaten as a simple flatbread. In parts of Lebanon and Syria, pita is baked at home and eaten within hours. And the difference between that version and the sealed supermarket bag version sold in most Western countries is stark enough to feel like two entirely different foods. Pretzel. Germany did not invent the pretzel shape by accident. The distinctive twisted knot design comes from a long baking tradition where the looped form helped regulate even heat distribution during baking. Pretzels are made from a wheat dough similar to bread, but before baking, they are dipped in a lye solution or baked soda bath. That alkaline treatment is what gives pretzels their defining mahogany crust, their chewy exterior, and the sharp, almost bitter edge underneath the salt. Without the bath, you would have bread. With it, you have a completely different food. The surface caramelizes differently under alkaline conditions. creating a color and crunch that yeast-risen bread cannot produce any other way. Traditional German soft pretzels are thick, warm, and served with mustard, chewy inside with that crackled outer shell. American hard pretzels go thinner, crispier, and saltier, designed for snacking rather than pairing. The two share a name but occupy different categories of experience. In Bavaria, the soft pretzel is not snack food. It is eaten at breakfast with white sausage and sweet mustard, which makes it feel more like a ritual than a meal. Whether the American hard pretzel version respects that origin is something German bakers tend to have strong opinions about. Phyllo dough. Phyllo dough is wheat flour stretched so thin you can read a newspaper through it. That is not a metaphor. Skilled phyllo makers in Greece and Turkey traditionally stretch a single ball of dough across an entire table until it reaches near transparency, then layer it repeatedly with butter or oil to build pastry structures through accumulated delicacy rather than enriched dough. The word phyllo comes from the Greek word for leaf, and the name describes the result accurately. Each sheet is paper thin. The flavor alone is mild and almost neutral, but layered and baked, it creates something flaky, crisp, and shatteringly light in a way that no single layer pastry can achieve. Baklava, spanakopita, and borek all rely on phyllo as their structural base, and each of those dishes becomes impossible without the layering logic. The challenge with phyllo is that it dries and tears within seconds of exposure to air, which makes hand stretching an act of precision and speed. Commercial phyllo sheets address the difficulty problem but lose some of the irregular, handmade texture that experienced cooks recognize immediately. Whether commercial phyllo is acceptable for serious baking is a conversation that comes up in every culture where phyllo has roots, and it never fully resolves. Naan. Most flatbreads cook on a flat surface. Naan cooks on a vertical wall of fire, and that difference changes everything about the result. Naan is a leavened wheat flatbread from South and Central Asia, traditionally baked by slapping the raw dough directly onto the inner wall of a tandoor oven, a clay vessel fired to extremely high temperatures. The dough hangs and bakes simultaneously, developing charred spots, a soft and pillowy interior, and a slightly smoky edge that no pan or standard oven can fully replicate. It is made from white wheat flour, water, yogurt, and a leavening agent, and the yogurt contributes both softness and a mild tang to the finished bread. Naan is torn and used to scoop curries, lentils, and grilled meats, and the tearing itself is part of the eating experience. Restaurant naan baked in a conventional oven tends to be softer and less complex, and once you have eaten tandoor-baked naan fresh off the wall with a brush of butter and a scatter of garlic, the restaurant version can feel noticeably flat. There are regional versions with fillings, stuffed with spiced potato or minced meat, and these are their own argument about whether the flatbread is the star or just a wrapper. Bagel. The bagel's defining moment happens before it ever touches an oven. Unlike nearly every other bread-type product, bagels are boiled first, then baked. The raw dough rings go into simmering water, sometimes sweetened with malt syrup, for 1 to 2 minutes per side before being transferred to the oven. That boiling step sets the outer layer of the dough before the inside fully expands, which is why bagels are dense, chewy, and thin-skinned in a way that no other bread achieves. The boiling also gives the crust its characteristic shine. Bagels originated in Jewish communities in Poland and arrived in New York City in large numbers during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, where they became embedded in the city's food identity. A New York bagel is typically hand-rolled, boiled in water, and has a tight, chewy crumb that snaps back slightly when you bite it. The versions sold pre-sliced and bagged in most supermarkets are broader, softer, and closer in texture to bread rolls, and longtime bagel eaters tend to have sharp feelings about that distinction. The toppings debate, from plain to everything to sesame to poppy seed, generates its own commentary that rarely reaches agreement. What you put on a bagel, and whether cream cheese is obligatory or just common, is apparently a question worth defending. Seitan. Seitan is wheat that has had nearly everything removed except one thing. That one thing is gluten, the protein network that gives wheat dough its stretch and strength. To make seitan, wheat flour dough is kneaded under running water until the starch washes away, leaving behind a dense, elastic, protein-rich mass. That mass is then seasoned and cooked, and the result is a chewy, fibrous food that absorbs whatever broth, soy sauce, or spice it is simmered in. Seitan has been eaten in China and Japan for over 1,000 years, mostly in Buddhist cooking where meat avoidance required a protein source with serious textural substance. It arrived in Western markets much later, primarily through vegetarian and vegan food culture, where it became one of the few plant-based proteins with a genuinely meat-like bite and density. The name seitan itself was coined in Japan in the 1960s. A great version is tender, deeply flavored, and satisfying enough that first-time eaters often ask what they are eating. A poorly made version is rubbery, bland, and difficult to finish. Whether seitan counts as a real food or a processed substitute is the kind of question that produces fundamentally different answers depending entirely on who you ask, and the gap between those answers is wide. Couscous. Couscous is not a grain. Most people treat it like one, but couscous is actually a pasta. Made from semolina wheat rolled into tiny spheres and dried. The misunderstanding is understandable because the granules are so small that cooking couscous looks more like rehydrating rice than boiling noodles. In North Africa, where couscous has been a staple for at least 1,000 years, it is traditionally steamed multiple times over a broth in a clay pot called a couscousier, not simply soaked in boiling water. That slow steaming makes each granule light, separate, and faintly fluffy, thus absorbing the aromatics from whatever cooks below it. The quick-cook couscous sold in most supermarkets is pre-steamed and simply needs hot water, which is convenient but produces a noticeably softer and less textured result. In Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, couscous is not a side dish. It is the centerpiece of Friday family meals, piled high in a wide communal bowl and topped with vegetables, chickpeas, and slow-cooked lamb or chicken. The dish was inscribed on UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage List in 2020, credited jointly to Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Mauritania, which itself triggered discussion about whose version is most authentic and whether any single country should hold that claim first.